Tully felt it in her spine first. Not a sound, not a smell, not any of the useful things her 4 ears and her scent glands were built to catch. Just a cold thread pulling tight somewhere between her second and third vertebrae. The kind of feeling her grandmother once called the old wire. The thing that fired when the math of the room changed, and your body knew before your brain did. She was mid-deal with the Korvathi merchant. 3 data chips spread across her stall counter. Her voice steady and her price firm, when the wire yanked hard enough to stop her tongue. Across the market, a Mavari seed vendor froze with one paw raised above his display. 2 stalls down, an Uvani silk trader sat back from her loom and tucked all 6 limbs against her body. On the mezzanine above, a cluster of prey-class dock workers stopped walking at the same time, like someone had pressed a button none of them could see. Tully's ears rotated independently, left pair sweeping forward, right pair fanning wide, and her scent glands flushed cold enough to ache. Something had entered the mid-ring market. Not an apex. She knew the signature of apex the way she knew her own heartbeat, that heavy rolling pressure, like standing too close to a generator, all size and heat, and engineered confidence that said, I am the biggest thing in this room, and we both know it. This was different. This was a frequency her body could receive, but not decode. A signal arriving on a channel prey biology had never needed to name, because nothing in 11,000 years of galactic contact had ever broadcast on it. She looked toward the south entrance. A figure walked in. Average height by galactic standard, maybe a little shorter than the Vithani trackers, who ran their hunting contracts out of the East Wing bars. Definitely smaller than any apex on station. No armor, no visible augmentation, no threat display of any kind. The figure wore simple transit clothes, carried a single shoulder bag, and was browsing the fruit stalls with the unhurried attention of someone on vacation. It was a human. Tully had never seen one in person. The human picked up a round yellow fruit from an Uvani vendor's display, turned it over, smelled it, and smiled at the vendor, a wide, easy expression that showed teeth. The vendor almost fell off her stool. Prey species don't show teeth to strangers. Teeth are what kills you. Teeth are what you see last. Teeth are the universal language of, this is over for you now. And here was this creature, flashing a full set of omnivore dentition like it was handing out gifts. The human bought 3 fruits and moved on, weaving through the market with a gait that made Tully's processing centers stutter and restart. Because the walk was wrong. The human moved like prey, adaptive pathing, non-linear, eyes sweeping periphery, weight balanced for sudden directional change. Every hallmark of a species that had spent evolutionary millennia being hunted and eaten and hunted again. But the attention behind the eyes was apex. Everything the human looked at, she evaluated in under a second. Structural layout, crowd density, exit points, the tracker sitting at the bar whose heat pits had flared the moment she entered. Filed, categorized, dismissed, next. Tully watched a creature that was running prey software and apex software at the same time. 2 evolutionary programs that should have been mutually exclusive, operating in seamless parallel like they had always belonged together. Her grandmother's voice again, very far away. When you see something your body cannot name, you do not wait for your brain to catch up, you leave. Tully did not leave. She couldn't. Across the market, the tracker at the bar, a Vithani named Resik, senior bounty agent, the closest thing the mid-ring had to an apex by reputation, stopped talking to his contract partner mid-sentence. His heat pits were wide open, the membranes flushing dark with blood flow, pulling thermal data from the human's body at maximum resolution. Tully knew enough about tracker biology to read what his posture meant. He was confused. The human's thermal signature was warm-blooded and running calm, heart rate low, respiration even, no chemical stress markers. The body of a resting predator in a space full of strangers and potential threats. Nothing rested like that, unless it was either completely harmless or so far up the chain that rest was a permanent state. Resik's contract partner, a younger Vithani with fresh scale mold, said something Thule couldn't hear. Resik didn't answer. He was watching the human the way a river watches a new stone in its current, unable to stop flowing around it, unable to understand why the water had changed. The human reached the Bureau of Transit window at the market's north edge. The clerk, a herd-class Thesic, wide-shouldered and procedural, processed her docking credentials, her species tag, her station entry clearance, and then stopped. His console had flagged something. Tully watched his ears fold flat, watched him tap his screen twice, watched him lean back and call his supervisor with the careful restraint of someone who had just opened a cabinet and found a live wire inside. The supervisor came, read the screen, and called her supervisor. The human waited in line with her bag on her shoulder and ate one of the yellow fruits, juice running down her wrist. She didn't look impatient. She didn't look anything. Tully slipped back to her stall and pulled up the Galactic Bureau of Species Classification on her data terminal, fingers working fast, entering the keyword human with the frantic efficiency of someone diffusing ordnance. The file was enormous. She skipped the biology, skipped the homeworld data, skipped the cultural overview, and went straight to the classification summary. There it was, the only dual classification in the Bureau's 11,000-year history, stamped in amber warning text, Prey, Apex. She read further. Persistence predation, a hunting strategy where the predator does not outrun the prey, but simply follows it until the prey's body fails from exhaustion and heat. Pattern lock cognition, the ability to identify, track, and predict behavioral routines across extended time periods without technological assistance. Cooperative cross-species pack bonding, the documented tendency to form social attachments with non-human species, including predators larger and more dangerous than themselves, and to integrate those species into their social and hunting structures. Violence scaling, non-linear. The Bureau's note here was dense with academic hedging, but the core data was simple enough for Thule's cold hands to understand. Humans do not escalate in predictable stages. They maintain baseline calm until a threshold is crossed, and then deploy maximum response with no intermediate steps, like a light switch with only 2 settings. The advisory at the bottom of the file was 1 paragraph long. Tully read it twice. If a human is being polite to you, this does not indicate the absence of threat. It indicates that the human has assessed you and determined you are not currently a target. And this determination is subject to change at any time based on criteria the human is not obligated to disclose. Tully looked up from her screen. Across the market, the human had finished her fruit. She was looking directly at Tully's stall. She waved, small friendly, the kind of wave a neighbor gives across a garden fence. Tully's 4 ears folded flat against her skull, and every strand of fur on her body stood at full bristle, and she raised 1 trembling paw, and waved back, because what else do you do when the apex of apex says hello and smiles at you with all of her teeth? Resik had been the best hunter on Karak 7 for 11 years, and in those 11 years he had learned one absolute truth about predation. Every predator leaks. Every single one. Apex species leaked dominance, size, sound, chemical intimidation, the brute geometry of a body built to end things. Trackers leaked focus, heat pit orientation, muscle tension, the involuntary narrowing of attention that said, I have selected you from the herd. Even prey-class beings leaked their own hunting of information, their ears twitching toward data, their scent glands sampling exits. Everything that hunted anything gave off a signal, and Resik had spent his entire adult life reading those signals the way a linguist reads dead languages, with fluency and reverence and the absolute certainty that the grammar never changes. The human leaked nothing. He ran her docking credentials through his personal network. Favors owed, palms greased, the usual architecture of a tracker who had made himself essential to the station's shadow economy, and got back clean data that told him almost everything, and revealed almost nothing. Name: Marin Voss. Species: human, Sol 3. Classification: Prey Apex, Dual. Registered profession: Independent Retrieval Specialist. That last line was tracker code, and he knew it like he knew his own scales. Skip tracer, bounty work, the hunting of people who had decided they did not want to be found. She was on his ground, doing his work, and she had not contacted him, had not registered with the local guild, had not performed any of the professional courtesies that trackers extended to one another when operating in shared territory. This was either ignorance or contempt. He decided to find out which. He chose the bar on the east mezzanine, neutral ground, good sightlines, a place where trackers talked shop, and prey-class servers kept the drinks moving with the quiet efficiency of creatures who knew when to be invisible. She arrived exactly when he expected her to, which should have been his first warning. He had let it be known through the usual channels that a fellow retrieval specialist might enjoy a drink at the thermal, and she had picked up on the signal within one station cycle, which meant she was either monitoring tracker communication frequencies, or she had already built a social network efficient enough to catch gossip in real time. She sat across from him and said hello, and he noticed two things immediately. First, her eyes, forward-facing like any predator's, but with an expressiveness that tracker biology did not produce. A layered signaling system where the muscles around the eyes communicated as much as the eyes themselves, warmth and attention and calculation all operating simultaneously behind a surface that looked like friendliness. Second, her stillness. She sat the way a Vithani elder sits, with the deep economy of movement that comes from absolute certainty about when movement will be necessary. Except Vithani elders earned that stillness through decades of hunting, and she seemed to have been born with it. He opened with standard tracker protocol. Heat pits wide, posture expansive, chin angled to expose the maximum surface area of his thermal array. A dominance display that communicated, "I am reading you at full resolution, and I am not hiding that fact." She ordered a drink he had never heard of, something brown and hot that smelled like burnt plant matter, and asked him how long he had been on Korath 7. Simple question, polite question, the kind of question a newcomer asks a local, nothing more. He answered, 11 years, give or take a molting cycle, and asked her the same. 3 days, she said, and asked if the market district had always been on the mid-ring, or if it had migrated from somewhere else. And harmless, and asked what had brought her to Korath 7. Contract work, she said, nothing special, and asked whether the station's entertainment district drew mostly tracker clientele or a mixed crowd. He answered, and asked another question, and she answered, and asked another question, and 4 exchanges later, he realized what had happened. She had been interviewing him. Every question she asked had been a survey coordinate, station layout, population flow, social geography, the distribution of species classes across the station's rings, and every answer he gave had been a data point she filed with the same calm efficiency he had seen in the market. He had been trying to extract information from her. He had gotten her drink order and her arrival date. She had gotten a complete social map of Korath 7 from the perspective of its top predator, delivered freely, packaged in pleasant conversation, paid for with nothing but eye contact, attention that made you feel like the most interesting person in the room. She thanked him when she left. She meant it. He could tell because his heat pits read the micro-flush of genuine warmth across her face. The real thing. Not performed, not strategic. She was actually grateful for his time. That made everything worse. He spent the next cycle running surveillance through the station's camera network. Another favor, another palm, the machinery of territory, and watched Marin Voss work. She visited 11 locations in 14 hours. A prey-class data broker in the mid-ring market, the small Mavari, Tully, the one with the 4 ears and the reputation for clean information. A herd-class labor coordinator in the docking ring. 3 food vendors, 2 transit clerks, a maintenance supervisor, and a medical supply outlet in the lower ring. At each stop, she talked. Not interrogated, not pressured, not leveraged. Talked about families, and shift schedules, and whether the station's air recyclers had been running warmer than usual. And she remembered details from previous conversations, and asked follow-up questions that made people's faces do strange things. Soft things. The kind of expression Resic associated with pack animals greeting their young. She bought people food. She learned their names and used them. And they told her things, small things, harmless things, the daily texture of life on Korath 7. Except Resic understood that daily texture was exactly what a skip tracer needed, because fugitives don't hide from sensors, they hide inside routines. And the person who understands the station's routines at the granular level is the person who can spot the routine that doesn't fit. The prey-class beings she spoke with were the most revealing data source on the station, and they couldn't figure out why they kept talking to her. Resic could. Safe. Her body language was prey. Non-threatening, adaptive, shoulders soft, no height dominance, no territorial posturing, and it spoke directly to the oldest part of their brains, the part that assessed threats before conscious thought could intervene. And it said, I am like you, I am small, I am watchful, we are the same kind of afraid. It was a lie told in the language of bodies, and it was perfect. He followed her through the lower ring for 6 hours on the second day, staying 2 corridors back, using thermal overlay to track her heat signature through walls. She never looked behind her. Not once. He took this as confirmation that his surveillance was clean until he reviewed her route later that evening and felt something cold settle behind his ribs. Her path through the lower ring made no logistical sense for the stops she made. Too many redundant turns, unnecessary corridor changes, a long loop through a maintenance section with no relevant contacts, unless the path was designed for someone following 2 corridors back on thermal overlay. She had known he was there. She had adjusted her route to show him exactly what she wanted him to see: the harmless stops, the friendly conversations, the surface of a hunt that looked like a social visit, while concealing whatever she had actually learned behind the noise of visible activity. She had used him as a sensor. His presence confirmed which corridors had tracker network surveillance coverage, which junctions had blind spots, which sections of the station were monitored, and which were dark. He had been her mapping tool, and she had never once looked back to check if the tool was working, because she already knew it would be. Resic returned to his quarters and locked his door. He stood in the dark for a long time, heat pits cycling open and closed in the rhythm his species used for deep processing, and he tried to find the word for what Marin Voss was in the taxonomy he had built his life inside. Competitor was too small. Threat was too simple. He settled, at last, on a word from old Vithani hunting language, a word that hadn't been used in 3 generations, because the thing it described hadn't existed in 3 generations. Rekthal. It meant the thing you track that is also tracking you and is better at it. Dranik had been the largest living thing on Korath 7 for 9 years, and in those 9 years nothing had made him hesitate. Hesitation was a prey word. It described the gap between seeing a threat and choosing a response, the frozen interval where the body locked and the brain screamed and evolution whispered, "You are about to be eaten unless you move right now." Apex species did not have that gap. The Korvathi, 8-limbed, thorax-armored, jaws built to crack pressure-sealed hull plating, had edited hesitation out of their neurology somewhere around the 4th extinction event on their homeworld, the one that killed everything that paused. Dranik had never paused. Not when a docking dispute turned into a tracker-on-tracker knife fight in the cargo ring. Not when a damaged freighter vented atmosphere across an entire residential block, and he had to carry 19 prey-class evacuees through hard vacuum in his arms. Questioned his enforcement record, and he stood before 12 species representatives and answered every challenge without blinking, because Korvathi did not blink. He reviewed the human's file the morning of the compliance interview and found it unremarkable. One human, female, skip tracer, dual classified under a bureaucratic anomaly that the Galactic Bureau had probably generated to avoid the paperwork of creating a new category. He scheduled the interview for midday in his office, the enforcement hub on the upper ring, built to Korvathi specifications. Every doorframe and console and chair scaled to remind visiting species that this was Apex architecture, and they were guests in it. The chair across from his desk was adjustable. He set it 2 notches lower than standard. A small thing, a dominance microcalibration, the kind of environmental control that Apex-class enforcement officers learned in their first year. Make them sit below your eye line. Make them look up. Make the geometry of the room do the work before you open your mouth. Maren Voss arrived 10 minutes early. She walked into the enforcement hub with the same unhurried gait the security feeds had shown him. That strange prey-apex hybrid locomotion, watchful and calm, and absolutely unconcerned with the fact that every surface in the room was designed to diminish her. She was carrying something. A sealed container, thermal active, the kind of portable vessel used for hot liquid transport. She set it on his desk. "Courtesy custom," she said, and her voice was even and warm, and completely unbothered by the fact that she was sitting in a lowered chair, looking up at a being who outmassed her by a factor of 6, and could close one hand around her entire torso. "My species does this. Brings something to drink when visiting someone's workspace for the first time." Dranik looked at the container. He did not eat gifts from strangers. Protocol. Basic operational security. The kind of rule you learned after the first poisoning attempt and never forgot. But the container sat on his desk with the casual inevitability of furniture, as if it had always been there, and some part of his attention snagged on it and would not release. He began the interview. Standard compliance framework, operational scope, jurisdictional boundaries, weapons declaration, target identification, timeline estimate, cooperation requirements with station enforcement. He deployed the standard Apex toolkit while he asked his questions. Physical proximity, leaning forward across the desk to compress the space between them. Vocal register dropped to the subsonic range that vibrated in smaller species' chest cavities. Direct visual lock maintained without interruption. These tools worked. They worked on prey, who folded and deferred and made themselves small. They worked on trackers, who acknowledged the display, adjusted their posture to signal, "I am not challenging you." They worked on other Apex, who either matched the display or backed down, depending on relative size and status. Maren Voss did none of these things. She maintained eye contact, not aggressively, not submissively, just steadily, the way a stone maintains contact with the river flowing around it. She did not lean back. She did not adjust her posture. She did not produce any of the microsignals his Korvathi neurology was built to read. No submission cues, no dominance response, no fear chemistry, no territorial counterclaim. She just sat in her lowered chair and answered every question he asked with complete, specific, unreserved honesty. Her target was a Thesic named Solon Ik, herd class, former corporate genomics officer, wanted for theft of proprietary biological data by a conglomerate called Vestry United. She estimated a 5-day retrieval window. Not require weapons above personal defense classification. She would appreciate cooperation from station enforcement, but did not require it. She said all of this the way someone describes their morning schedule, clearly, efficiently, without drama or performance. And that was the weapon. Dranik realized it somewhere between her 4th answer and her 5th. felt the understanding arrive not as thought, but as a cold displacement in his thorax. A physical sensation he had to reach back 40 years to identify. Because Marin Voss was not hiding anything. A predator who hides their intent gives you something to detect, and detecting it is how you maintain dominance. You see the concealment, you name the strategy, you position yourself above it. A predator who hands you their entire operational brief and says, "Here, have all of it. I am not playing the game you think we are playing." That predator has removed the mechanism by which you assert. She was not asking his permission. She was offering him the appearance of authority over a process she was going to execute, whether he cooperated or not. And the offer itself was a kindness, a social lubricant, a way of letting him maintain his status in front of his officers, while she did exactly what she came to do. The cold thing in his thorax expanded. He recognized it now. Hesitation. Not the prey version, not the frozen gap before flight, but something older and stranger. A deep Corvati circuit that hadn't fired since he was juvenile, and had wandered into a territory belonging to a rival male, twice his size. Not fear exactly. Recalculation. The sudden involuntary awareness that the math of the room had changed, and he was no longer the largest variable in the equation. Not because she was bigger, not because she was stronger, not because she could hurt him in any physical dimension that mattered. Decided how this interaction would end, and she was right, and they both knew it. He granted her operational clearance. He told himself it was jurisdictional efficiency. A cooperative retrieval was cleaner than a contested one. Less paperwork, fewer cross-species incident reports, the pragmatic choice. He printed the clearance seal himself, and handed it across the desk, and their hands did not touch, because she was careful about that. Careful in a way that told him she knew exactly how much physical contact an Apex-class Corvathi would tolerate from a stranger. Which meant she had studied his species before she walked in. She stood, thanked him, and left. The door closed. Dranik sat in the silence of his office and looked at the container on his desk. He pulled up the Galactic Bureau file on humans and scrolled past the biology, past the persistence predation data, past the violence scaling metrics, until he found the section labeled Interspecies. Social behavior. Cooperative pack bonding, it said. Humans form social attachment structures with non-human species, it said. They domesticated apex predators on their homeworld by feeding them, it said. They approached dangerous animals with offerings of food and drink and sustained non-threatening interaction until the animal's threat assessment recalibrates to classify the human as a member of its social group, it said. He looked at the container on his desk. He understood what it was now. He did not drink it, but he did not throw it away. 3 officers asked about it during the remainder of his shift. What was in the container? Who had left it? Did he want it disposed of? He told each of them to attend to their duties. The container sat on his desk through the rest of the day and into the evening, and when he locked the office and walked to his quarters, he could still feel its weight in the room behind him. Small and warm and impossibly patient, like the woman who had left it there. Solin Ik had been hiding for 6 months, and he was good at it. Herd-class species understood concealment the way apex species understood violence, not as a skill, but as a birthright, a genetic inheritance passed down through millennia of being the thing that got eaten, the soft thing, the running thing, the thing that survived not by fighting, but by folding itself so deep into the architecture of the world that the hunter's eyes slid past without catching. He had built his disappearance with herd precision. New identity, a Thessic dock laborer named Valen Kess, registered through a data broker 2 rings removed from any legitimate database. New routine, shift work in the cargo sublevel, 12 hours on, 12 hours off, the kind of invisible grind that nobody looked at twice. New face, not literally, but close enough. A chemical scale treatment that shifted his coloring from corporate silver to labor-class brown, the biological equivalent of changing your height. Uniform. Support network. 4 herd-class sympathizers, who believed he was a whistleblower, not a thief, who rotated his supply drops, who watched the corridors and sent word when tracker-class agents came through, asking questions. He had evaded 2 retrieval teams already, 1 Vethani tracker pair and 1 mixed-species crew, by doing what herd-class prey had always done. Outlast their attention. Trackers were sensory predators, fast, precise, devastating in short bursts of focused hunting. But their neurology was built for the sprint, not the siege. You hid well enough, long enough, and their pattern lock degraded. Their attention migrated to fresher signals. Their biology whispered, this trail is cold, find a warm one. 6 months was an eternity in tracker time. Solon had won. He believed this with the bone-deep certainty of a prey animal that has outlasted the predator's interest window. The certainty that says, I am still here, and they have moved on, and I am safe. He heard about the human on the 2nd day of her arrival, through his network, a herd-class dock worker, who said a new retrieval agent had registered, species, human, classification, something weird, and Solon filed it under manageable threat, and continued his shift. He heard more on the 3rd day. The human was talking to people in the market, buying fruit, making friends. On the 4th day, he heard she had met with Resik the Vethani, and with Dranik the enforcement chief, and had walked away from both conversations with exactly what she wanted. On the 5th day, his network went quiet. Not silent, quiet. The difference mattered. Silence meant compromise, meant someone had been caught or threatened or turned, meant the architecture of his concealment had been breached and he needed to run. Quiet meant something else. Quiet meant his contacts were still in place, still functional, still free. Had stopped sending information, because the information they had was too strange to process. His secondary contact, a herd-class maintenance technician, finally sent a single message on the 6th day. She came to my section and asked about the air recyclers, and she remembered my daughter's name from a conversation I do not remember having, and I told her things, and I do not know why. Solon read the message 3 times. He did not understand it. His tertiary contact sent a shorter message on the 7th day. She is not hunting you the way I understand hunting. His primary contact sent the shortest message of all on the 8th day. I think she already knows where you are. I think she has known for 2 days. I do not know why she has not come. That was the message that changed the math. Because Solon Ike was herd class, and herd class neurology was built around one supreme calculation, one equation that every prey animal on every world in every system ran constantly in the deep background of their brain. Can I outrun this thing? If yes, stay. If no, run now. The calculation required data, speed, distance, the predator's position, the nearest exit, the energy cost of flight versus the energy cost of continued hiding. And Maren Voss had just made the calculation impossible. Because she wasn't closing distance. She wasn't staking out his bolt hole. She wasn't doing anything that his herd-class brain could plot on the ancient graph of predator versus prey. She was walking. The security feeds, Solon had a contact in the monitoring office, one last thread of his network still producing data, showed her walking the sub-level corridors. Not searching. Walking. Hour 1, Hour 2, Hour 5, Hour 9, the same even pace, the same relaxed posture. Stopping occasionally to sit on a cargo crate and eat a meal from her bag, then standing and resuming, covering the sub-level grid in long methodical loops that never doubled back and never hurried. Solon watched the feed and felt something his species had not felt in evolutionary memory, because his species had never needed to feel it, because nothing in the galaxy hunted like this. The old fear was binary, run or hide, sprint or freeze, the clean math of a body built to explode into motion. This new thing was not clean. This new thing was the slow dawning understanding that sprinting was irrelevant. That she was not trying to be faster than him. That she was not trying to catch him. That she was simply going to be there, in his sublevel, in his corridors, in the space he had built his survival inside, walking at the same unhurried pace, today and tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that, until the architecture of his concealment was not breached, but dissolved, not by force, but by the steady, patient friction of a presence that did not leave. On the station's Prey-class communication network, the informal web of signals and warnings that connected every prey-bodied creature on Korath 7, something was rippling. Tuli felt it from her market stall 2 rings away, a disturbance in the usual background hum of threat data. And when she traced it to its source, she found a phrase being passed between Prey-class workers in the cargo sublevel, a phrase that none of them had coined and all of them understood. She is walking something to death. The oldest prey on station, a near-blind Uvanai elder who ran a tea service on the docking ring and who had lived through enough to see most things twice, heard the phrase and said nothing for a long time. Then she said, "My grandmother's grandmother told stories about a world where the predators did not chase, and those were the only stories that gave her nightmares." On the 3rd day of walking, Solon ran. From his brain, it came from his legs, from the deep herd-class motor circuits that had been screaming go for 48 hours, while his conscious mind held them in check with the logic of, "She hasn't found you yet. Stay hidden, the math still works." The math stopped working at hour 61. He broke from his bolt hole at a dead sprint, heading for the docking ring, a route he had mapped and rehearsed 6 times. 4 corridors, 2 maintenance ladders, 1 service elevator, 9 minutes to his emergency shuttle reservation. He made it 7 minutes. The intersection where Corridor 6 met the service elevator lobby was empty when he turned the corner, except for one person, Marin Voss. Sitting on the floor with her back against the wall, legs crossed, data pad in her lap, a half-eaten meal beside her. She looked up at him. She did not stand. "You made good time," she said, and her voice carried no triumph, no tension. Predatory edge of any kind, just the mild, factual tone of someone observing the weather. His herd-class cardiovascular system was in full crisis. Hearts hammering in staggered arrhythmia, adrenal glands dumping their entire reserve into his bloodstream, legs locked in the rigid tremor of a sprint interrupted. And she was sitting on the floor eating dinner. She reached into her bag and pulled out a sealed water container and held it toward him. "Drink something," she said. "You've been running on stress chemistry for 3 days, and your electrolyte balance is probably terrible." He stared at her. She waited. Not patiently in the way that implied she was suppressing impatience. Patiently in the way that implied patience was her resting state, her default mode, the thing she returned to when all other options had been exhausted, which in her case meant never, because patience was never exhausted. That was the whole point. Still holding the water, still sitting on the floor, still looking up at him with those forward-facing eyes that saw everything and threatened nothing. "I will be at the next intersection, and the one after that, and I will bring water to those as well, because you will need it more each time, and I will need it less." Solon's legs gave out. Not from exhaustion, from the sudden catastrophic failure of the only survival program his biology had ever run. The program that said, "You can outrun this." The program that had kept his species alive for 800,000 years on a homeworld full of things with claws and teeth and speed. The program crashed because it had never encountered a predator that didn't need speed. He sat down on the corridor floor across from her. He took the water. He drank it. In the security monitoring office 2 rings above, Resic watched the feed with his heat pits cycling at a frequency he hadn't used since apprenticeship. The deep processing rhythm, the one reserved for information that restructured your understanding of the world. 40 species were watching the same feed across the station. pulled in by the Prey class network's alert, by tracker curiosity, by Apex class enforcement monitoring. A human woman sitting on a floor, offering water to the man she had just hunted down by walking. Resic reached up and turned off his thermal overlay display. He didn't need it. For the first time in his professional life, he understood that the most dangerous sensory organ in the galaxy was not a heat pit or a sonar array or a chemical receptor or any of the elegant biological instruments the universe had spent billions of years engineering. It was patience, and humans had more of it than any species in the registry, because humans came from a world where patience was not a virtue, but a weapon, the original weapon, the one that worked before spears and fire, and language, the one that said, "I do not need to be faster than you, I only need to be here when you stop." The station did not return to normal. Tuli noticed it first, because Prey-class beings always noticed first. That was their function in any ecosystem. The canaries, the early sensors, the ones whose bodies registered change before change had a name. The mid-ring market rearranged itself in the 2 days between Marin's capture of Solon Ik and her scheduled departure. Not physically, the stalls stayed where they were. The walkways kept their geometry. The lighting and temperature and air circulation continued their cycles as if nothing had shifted. But the traffic patterns changed. Prey-class vendors, who had operated on the market's edges, tucked against walls, backs to solid surfaces, positioned for maximum escape route access, began drifting inward. Not far, a few meters, a stall width, a half-rotation toward the center, and the tracker-class regulars who had always claimed the central ground, the high-visibility real estate that said, "I see everything, and everything sees me." They compressed, not retreating, adjusting, making room for something they couldn't name in a space that hadn't asked them to move. Tully watched the rearrangement with the hyper-attentive fascination of a data broker who had just witnessed her entire market restructure along invisible lines. And she understood that Korath 7 was doing what ecosystems do when a new apex species enters the territory. Not fleeing, not fighting, not submitting, absorbing, shifting sightlines and repositioning dens, and adjusting the 1,000 small calibrations that allow 40 species to share a space without destroying each other. Except now the calibrations included a variable they had never accounted for, a species that was predator and prey simultaneously, that hunted with patience, and bonded with kindness, and smiled with teeth that meant hello instead of goodbye. On the morning of Marin's departure, she told herself it was business. A data packet Marin had purchased 3 days ago, standard delivery, nothing personal. She found Marin's berth in the mid-tier docking section, a small bay holding a small ship. No armor, no weapons arrays visible. A vessel as unassuming as the woman who flew it. Marin was loading the last of her equipment when Tuli arrived. A single case, nothing heavy, the toolkit of a hunter who traveled light, because the heaviest weapon she carried was between her ears. Solon Ik was already aboard, secured and calm in the way that prey goes calm after the chase ends. The deep hormonal surrender that says it is over and I am still alive, and that is enough. Tuli handed over the data packet. Marin took it, checked the seal, and transferred payment to Tuli's account. Double the agreed price. Tuli's ears rotated in confusion. "That is twice the contract amount," said. "The extra is a thank you for being honest when you didn't have to be. You could have sold me false data, or delayed delivery, or tipped off the target, and you chose not to. And where I come from, that gets acknowledged." Tully's threat detection was firing. It had been firing since the moment she entered the docking bay, the old wire humming its ancient song of predator, predator, predator. But layered over it now, woven through it like a second melody in a key her species had never learned, was something else. Trust. Not the prey-class version of trust, which was really just a calculation of, this being is unlikely to eat me based on current data. Something warmer and more dangerous. Trust that was not built on the absence of threat, but on the presence of something harder to name, reciprocity maybe, or recognition, or the simple unprecedented experience of being treated as a partner by a creature her body insisted was the most dangerous thing on the station. Tully did not have a word for this in Mivari. She stirred in the docking bay after Marin turned back to her loading, and she searched her language for a container that could hold the feeling, and she found nothing. So she built one, a new compound word assembled from the Mivari roots for predator who feeds and fear that walks toward. And she held the word in her mind like a coal from a new fire, fragile and warm, and likely to either illuminate something or burn her. And she decided she would keep it. The word entered the Prey-class lexicon on Korath 7 within a cycle. It spread to 11 stations within a month. Nobody could translate it perfectly into any other language, but every Prey-class being who heard it understood it immediately, the way you understand a sound your grandmother made before she had words for what she meant. Resic was waiting at the docking ring gate. He had not planned to come, he had told himself. He had a contract briefing to prepare, and a territory to maintain, and no professional reason to see off a competitor who had operated on his ground for less than a standard cycle. His legs had brought him anyway. Marin saw him and walked over with that hybrid gait, prey soft and apex steady, and he realized he had stopped trying to read her thermal signature because it didn't matter. He had learned more about this creature by watching what she did than his heat pits had told him in 8 days of scanning. One question, he said. She waited. Do you always know where the target is from the beginning? She considered this with the honest attention he had learned to recognize as genuine, the real thing, not a performance, but the actual internal process of a mind that took questions seriously, because it took the asker seriously. No, she said, but I always know they will stop running before I stop walking. Resic processed this, reached into his belt pouch, and pulled out a data chip, a future contract referral, Tracker Guild standard, the professional equivalent of handing someone a key to your territory. It was the first time he had voluntarily shared hunting ground with another predator. Marin took the chip and nodded, and the nod said everything that a tracker would understand. I see the weight of this, and I will carry it accordingly. She went back to her ship. Resic stood at the gate and watched the bay doors cycle, and he thought about the old Vithani word, rekthal, the thing you track that is also tracking you, and he decided the word was wrong, not because it was inaccurate, but because it was incomplete. She was not tracking him. She was doing something worse. She was making him want to be tracked, to be known, to be mapped, to be included in whatever vast social architecture humans built around themselves by the simple method of paying attention to things until the things paid attention back. 2 rings above, in the enforcement hub, Dranik did not go to the docking ring. He sat in his office and watched his monitor as Marin's ship powered through its departure sequence. Systems check, docking clamp release, thruster alignment, the routine choreography of a vessel leaving port. She hailed the station on open comms, standard departure courtesy, nothing unusual, the kind of broadcast every ship made on its way out. Korath 7 Control, this is Vessel Ardent, departing berth mid-14. Thank you for your hospitality. A pause. And thank you, Chief Dranik. I left something on your desk. The channel closed. Dranik looked at his desk. There, beside his console, where the first container had sat for 3 days, before he finally disposed of it, was a second container. Same design, same thermal signature, same quiet presumptuous certainty that it belonged exactly where it had been placed. He stared at it. On his monitor, the Ardent cleared the docking ring and turned toward open space, a small ship getting smaller, carrying a woman who had walked onto his station and rearranged its hierarchy without raising her voice. He reached for the container. He opened it. The liquid inside was dark brown, and it smelled like something burning in a way that was somehow not unpleasant. A controlled combustion, a harnessed fire. He drank it. It was bitter and too hot and entirely wrong for his biology. His Korvathi digestive system flagged it as a mild irritant. His thermal receptors protested the temperature. His taste buds sent back confused reports about alkaloids and acids that had no business being consumed voluntarily. He finished all of it. He set the empty container down and sat in the silence of his office, and understood, with the crystalline clarity of a predator who has just been outmaneuvered in a dimension he didn't know existed, exactly what had happened. She had pack-bonded him. 11,000 years of Apex-class dominance, 9 years of being the biggest thing on this station, 40 years of never hesitating, and a human had walked into his office, set a cup of hot liquid on his desk, been polite, and left, and done it again, and now he was sitting here drinking the second cup because some ancient mammalian circuit in her brain had identified him as packable, and had executed the protocol with the same patient inevitability she brought to everything else. He would realize the full scope of this in about a week. He would be furious. Then he would submit a request to Galactic Bureau staffing for a permanent human liaison officer assigned to Korath 7, and he would justify it as jurisdictional efficiency and resource optimization and cross-species operational improvement. It would not be any of those things. Aboard the Ardent, 3 hours out from Korath 7, Marin Voss sat in her pilot's chair and filed her mission report. Target acquired, she wrote. Solon Ik, Fesic, Herd Class, apprehended without incident on Day 8. No weapons discharged, no injuries sustained by any party, minimal property disruption. The report said nothing about the Mavari data broker who had waved back with trembling paws. Nothing about the Vithani tracker who had handed her a key to his kingdom. Nothing about the Korvathi chief who had drunk her coffee. The report didn't need to say these things. They were not operational data. They were something older and less efficient and more important, and they lived in a part of Marin's cognition that didn't file reports. The part that remembered names, that noticed fear, that brought gifts to strangers, because her species had learned 100,000 years ago that the most powerful thing a predator can do is make another creature feel safe. She read it. She smiled. In the docking ring of Korath 7, 1 cycle later, the Prey-class early warning network fired. A new human had arrived, male, tall, broad-shouldered, laughing as he came through the transit gate, shaking hands with the customs clerk, asking about the best place to eat on station. Tully felt the old wire pull tight, and her ears flatten and her scent glands flush cold. But beside the old signal, threaded through it like light through water, was something new. A second frequency, faint and unfamiliar, and trembling with the dangerous possibility of a feeling her species had never been permitted to have toward a predator. Curiosity. The station was adapting. 40 species, 11,000 years of rigid classification, a taxonomy that had never bent. Bending now. Not breaking, bending. The way a living thing bends. The way a forest shifts when a new creature walks its floor, not in surrender, but in recognition, in the deep biological acknowledgement that the ecosystem has changed, and the change is permanent. And the only question left is not whether to make room, but how much. The answer, as it turned out, was enough. It was always going to be enough.